And we are live.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight to Community Conversations on Race. Very excited to have this distinguished panel here tonight. This is our 10th community conversation, and we want to thank all the new viewers, the viewers who have come on, who have been joining us every time. We've really enjoyed these times. Really important conversations around different topics. Feel free to check out our website. We have them posted up there on capsonoma.org. Very excited for tonight. We have Sheba Person-Whitley. We have Dr. Ollie Johnson. We have Claire Mack. And the title tonight is Kenosha, Wisconsin, and What's Next for the Black Community. We have a series of questions for the panelists and really excited to hear what they have to say. So thank you all for being here. And thank you to the viewers who are signed on tonight. My name is Marcus Clarke. I work for a Community Action Partnership and very proud to represent the team behind the scenes and all the board staff, everyone who's been working on these. Want to say thank you. And thank you to the past participants and all those who have supported this program. Thank you so much. Okay, so the bios for tonight, I'm going to start off with Ollie Johnson. Ollie is chair and professor in the Department of African American Studies at Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan. He is the co-editor of 3 books, including Comparative Racial Politics in Latin America and Black Political Organizations in the Post-Civil Rights Era. Dr. Johnson received his PhD in political science from the University of California, Berkeley. Go Cal, go Bears. And his current research focuses on African American, Afro-Brazilian, and Afro-Latin American politics. So thankful for you to come tonight. Sheba Person-Whitley is the executive director at the Sonoma County Economic Development Board, which is right here, where she leads efforts to provide support and meet the needs of the small business community, especially during the fires and during this COVID pandemic. Sheba began her economic development career in 2008 and previously worked in the city of Stockton and the state of Louisiana. She has attended North Carolina State University in Raleigh, North Carolina. She's from North Carolina and received her master's degree in operations and project management at Southern New Hampshire University. Thank you so much, and so glad you're in Sonoma County. We are excited and happy for you to be here. Claire Mack. Claire has been a public servant for most of her life. In 1991, she became the first African-American woman to be elected to San Mateo City Council. San Mateo is a city in the middle of the peninsula, right in between San Francisco and San Jose, and went on to become the first African-American mayor. A plan to build public housing in North Central San Mateo, where most people of color lived at the time, propelled her to run for office. She also has a cake company. I know she's been working all day, so you look great for someone who's been baking all day. And the name of your company is called what, Claire?
Claire's Crunch Cake.
Good. Well, I wish I could run down there and get one after this because I know I'm going to need it. So great to have all of you. So excited for this discussion. Claire, I want to start with you. And I want to tell the whole audience that Claire's 83. So, I mean, that's pretty incredible. You look great.
It don't crack.
What'd you say?
I said it don't crack.
It don't crack. That's what I've heard. Also, the one thing that I want to tell everyone was we're going to talk for about 45 minutes, and then we're going to be taking questions from the audience along this time period. So put in your questions to the Facebook Live chat, and then they'll be relayed to me, and probably around 6:15, I'll ask them of the panelists. And the other rule I have for tonight is, Claire, no cursing.
That's going to be difficult.
There are children watching, okay? So actually, Claire, I want to start with you. You've lived through the 50s and 60s when civil rights was at its height, some would say. What would you say about that period versus this period? What are kind of your observations?
There's not much difference, which is sad. I am amazed at the inventiveness of supremacists. Well, that for 400 years, folks have worked on how to not work and how make someone else do the work for them, or have someone else do the work for them. I'd like to say a lot has changed, and it hasn't. What's going on in Kenosha, in Wisconsin right now is breaking my heart. And as much as I believe in Black Lives Matter, I want the people who are involved to stay home. Since the President of the United States has sent people out to do what the patty rollers and people have done for 400 years, please stay home and save your lives. I don't want to see anybody else killed who looks like me.
You know, staying there, you say that not much has changed. Some would say that we couldn't vote before, now we can vote. We couldn't intermarry before, now we can intermarry. All of these things that seem to be policies that have changed. So why would you say that nothing has changed?
The more things change, the more they remain the same, the more they change. We're still being lynched. There is still lynching going on in the United States of America. It may not be with a rope and a tree, but it's still happening. That man who was shot the other night with 7 shots in his back and was chained to a bed, that's lynching. It's still going on. Black people in this country are still being intimidated. You can certainly marry whom you choose. And you know, as much as they would like to say that it wasn't going on before, we've always had mixed children in this United States. Nothing has changed there. It's all the same. So it's legal now, but nothing has changed. People are still being intimidated. I had a young teacher in my house the other night. He teaches in the Sequoia School District, which is in Redwood City and down. And he told me that 2 young students called him, 2 young Black students, and told him they were frightened. They didn't want to go to school. Their mother works at Stanford University. They didn't want her to go to work. They're afraid that their mother will go out and be killed in some manner or another. And they're afraid for their own lives, just going to Sequoia High School down the road from me. This is in 2020, right now in the United States of America. What's changed? People of color are intimidated and frightened and terrorized in this country. And this man is talking about be afraid in the suburbs. Well, I've lived in the suburbs all of my life, and children in my communities are afraid right now. So what's changed?
Ollie, you study movements and you study African-American history and beyond. What would you say is different during this time, if anything?
First of all, thank you so much for having me, Marcus. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. You know, I have love for California, haven't lived there in a long time. But unfortunately, Claire put it so well. Everything has changed, but nothing has changed. And so it is ridiculous and outrageous that in 2020, we have Black men and women and children being killed, being murdered, being lynched when they're innocent and unarmed. What is going on? How is that possible? That's the bad news. The worst news is that it's happening all over the world. Wherever you have Black people, people of color, poor people, they are getting their butts kicked by poverty, by discrimination, by marginalization, by globalization. And so many of my friends and colleagues in Brazil and other countries say that you think you got it bad there. It happens all the time here. It happens more frequently here. Mm-hmm. And we don't even get the publicity that you guys in the United States get when someone is killed. And so it's outrageous, and it makes it very difficult to be optimistic. But I'm an eternal optimist. Mm-hmm. And so I like that in response to these outrages, people have come together, especially young people of all colors, classes, religions, and backgrounds to protest, to organize, and to mobilize. And that gives me hope that we will find a way as a people to make the changes that we need. It's not going to be easy, but it's necessary. And so in Detroit, as in many other cities around the country, there have been protests practically daily in response to what's happening here in Detroit and around the country. And so I think we can't give up hope.
Thank you. Sheba, what do you think about is different in this time period?
Well, Dr. Johnson and Claire both are really spot on with it. I mean, there really is a lot that has not changed. I would say to your question earlier about, laws and public policy decisions, I do feel like a lot of it is the check box. So you give people the right to vote, and then you have intentional systemic voter suppression, right? Or you say, oh, you can go to any school you want to, but then you set up systems in place that are based on property taxes, right? So you're going to create more disparity and more divide based on the systems and the policies that continue to exist in this country. And so I think, in my opinion, because I was not around during the civil rights movement, but I do see a lot of parallels between what I've read, and the stories I've heard from others and what we see playing out right now. It is like a really horrible, bad loop of oppression and violence and degradation and disparity. And I do think if there's two things that I personally think that are a little bit different or make what we are seeing right now in 2020 somewhat different, it's something that Ollie just talked about. It's the youth. I do see a ton of young people that are mobilized, that this is a catalyst for them. They're saying things like, and I'm not even offended by like, oh, I'm not my mama. I'm not my grandma. I'm not going to turn the other cheek. The time for that is over. And I think you see that. And I do also think that because we are in the digital age, that has made a difference. We have social media. We have all these different digital platforms that push these things out to the forefront in a way that maybe people could have been in, we know how people do. They like to deny things. They like to say, oh, that's an isolated incident. Oh no, that's, they're just exaggerating. Oh, those same narratives that we hear over and over and over to minimize the trauma and to minimize the extent of the brutality that Black people have faced in this country since its beginning. And so I do think that the social media and the digital age has pushed things into a spotlight. People filming things, as tragic and as awful as it is to see that, it pushes it into the forefront, into the spotlight, where you can't deny. There's no ambiguity anymore. There's no the other side of the story. When you see something and it's so jarring and it's so alarming and it's so traumatic and painful, there's no place to hide anymore. So I think that's what's a little bit different.
Great. Ollie, you mentioned something, your background is working with the Latin American community and a lot of Afro-Latins who have similar issues and similar backgrounds. Can you just give a little bit of the history maybe from the limited reading I've done? I know a lot of Africans were brought from the continent to the New World, and only some are here in the United States. And a lot of us who are on this call and our viewers, and we think about the Black experience as one in the United States. Although I don't believe that most folks who are brought from Africa even live in the United States. I believe that they could be throughout the diaspora. So maybe just a little bit about where folks are and just a little bit more about what people might be experiencing outside of just the United States.
Well, most of the kidnapped and enslaved Africans were taken to Brazil. I believe 4 or 5 million. And then the next largest number was taken to the Caribbean. And so the number of Black folks taken to the United States was much less than taken to other countries. And so, for example, we are about 13 to 15% of the population here in the United States. But in Brazil, the Afro-descendant population is about 55% of the population. And so Brazil has 200 million people. So that means you have over 100 million Afro-descendants. And as we know, most islands in the Caribbean have majority Black populations or majority Afro-descendant populations. So we truly are global people, and therefore we have diverse experiences. You know, we speak different languages, we have different histories and customs and practices, but unfortunately, we share the impact of discrimination, racism, white supremacy, capitalism, empire. And so in almost every country in the Americas, Black folks, along with indigenous people, are at the bottom of the social structure, social pyramid. And the negativity that is related to being Black, to being a person of color, remains strong. I mean, it's a worldwide phenomenon, even though some of our most famous and talented are global heroes. And so we live in a paradoxical situation in which our people are oppressed globally at the same time that leading actors and athletes and others are celebrated globally. And so it's a very paradoxical situation, but I would say for most of our people, it's still an intolerable, unacceptable situation. And you asked about Latinos, Latin America. One of the people often ask me, what are the differences between situation of Blacks in the United States and Brazil, Latin America? I always point to two main differences. The first is in Brazil and other Latin American countries like Cuba, Venezuela, Colombia, you had the emergence of the ideology or myth of racial democracy, which held that those countries had harmonious race relations, that everybody got along, that there wasn't any racism against Black folks. But it was really mythic. I mean, it was really created as a response to explicit white supremacy, but it became a justification for the continued subordination of Black folks. So many Latin American countries did not have formal, legal, explicit racial segregation like we had in the United States and in South Africa. So that's a major difference. And also in the United States, we have not, I like the way Claire put it, we've always had mixed families, interracial couples, but we haven't always had legal recognition of a separate category for mixed people. In many Latin American countries, you have had a public, explicit, in the case of Brazil, for example, legal recognition of a mulatto category or a mixed category, or brown category. And so when you have that type of legal public recognition, that kind of creates social boundaries that take on meaning. Now, most Black activists say, you know, it was just a divide and conquer strategy to separate mulattoes from Blacks or Blacks from Browns, but it's just part of their reality that we didn't have the same way here in the United States.
Interesting, interesting. Just so you know, right after this discussion, I'm going to print out a PhD degree for my own self and all the watchers and send it to them, because I think we all get PhDs after this conversation. So thank you. Claire, I know that you have been thoughtful and mindful of these experiences in the history for many years, and then you went ahead and ran for city council. Can you talk a little bit about why you did that and what your experience was on the city council?
I had a ball on the city council, and I was glad to leave it. I felt like the little frog in the water. I was boiling and I didn't know I was boiling. 12 years was enough. I loved doing it. I'm glad I was able to do it. I think I surprised a lot of people. I have a long history in San Mateo. My family came to San Mateo in 1913, and my dad ran the dump. Then I married a young gentleman who was a football star, and his brother had been a football star at San Mateo High School. So people knew me from a lot of different areas. Then I had a radio and television career in the 70s and 80s. And then by the 90s here, you know, I decided to run for office because one of the things we know how to do in the United States is build ghettos. And some do-good white folks wanted to come to San Mateo and knock down a lot of housing and put up public housing. And it was hard for me to convince them, but I tried to convince them that Black people like grass. We like the suburbs. We're down here. We were working in Hillsborough and Atherton. And since we lived here, let us continue to live here. They wanted to do this type of housing. So I found some like-minded people in the neighborhood, in the area, in the city of San Mateo. And we worked very hard to convince San Mateo that we didn't need to knock down all of these old houses. What we needed to do was to preserve them. And the ones we could keep, we would keep, because there's charm to an old home. And we worked at that. And as you said in the beginning, we were able to do something about low income housing, though we have not done enough. The city did stupid things like build a luxury site and gave away that property. And we had to infill to try to build it back or get it back. But to convince people that you don't have to have drastic measures to include people and allow us Americans to be Americans. And I don't like the term African American, because there are Africans in this country, there are Latin Africans in this country. And I think if we start adopting American African, to let some of these people in this country realize we're Americans, and I'm an American first. And I love my country. But I also know it can be a shithole country, as the president of this country calls some other countries. We have a lot of, you asked me not to swear. We have a lot of manure going on right here. We don't have to call any place in Africa, which is a continent, or any of the countries that have majority Black populations. They need not be called excrement countries, because we have a lot of excrement here. I have a big vocabulary and I can't.
I know you do. Well, thank you for using it the second time around. Great. I'm sure San Mateo is a great place because of your work. And
let me say this. I was quoting someone. Right. Shithole countries was not originated by me. So I want you to know that I wasn't swearing because I can swear. I was swearing because I was quoting someone. That's
true. All you kids out there, she was quoting someone else. Thank you. And
a very prominent someone else.
It's always struck to me where we as African Americans oftentimes have to speak on behalf of the Black community, where it's not necessarily we're trained in it or have PhDs in it, but we are kind of have to be experts in it and speak on behalf of that. And that's a conversation that's happening in sports right now, where an NBA coach named Doc Rivers said, you know what, I just would love to be a coach. I don't necessarily need to speak on race. You know, Tom Brady, who I know you love, Claire, Tom Brady is from San Mateo.
Yes.
So is
Oh,
Lynn
boy.
Swan. Actually, Barry Bonds went to high school. A lot of prominent folks, Dennis Keynes, who we were just talking about. I think he's on. You know, and oftentimes we have to be the voice of our folks in our generation. Sheba, you came to Santa Rosa, to Sonoma County, to work on business attraction and retention, those kind of things. And when I read about what you're doing, it's oftentimes about equity work and meeting with county supervisors and, you know, inclusive communities. And just wanted to, it's funny because I feel like Sonoma County describes itself as being one that's already liberal and progressive. So one, why would they need you and others to really do a focus on equity when, you know, some of your work would be focused on other things, and kind of your experience within that context of this progressive liberal community that Sonoma County claims to be?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I will tell you that I have been working with some colleagues at the county on specifically racial equity, which is different than equity for all. But I had similar questions like, why do we need this? Why do you need programs for that? Why do you need an entire department of an equity office? Like, why do you need that? And it's really because when you look at Sonoma County and when you look at disparity and when you look at the gaps, they're happening in communities of color, and they're happening because of the demographics in Sonoma County, Latinx populations and African-American populations, Black and brown people. And as a public servant, I really feel like it is an obligation when you realize there's a problem, and specifically when you know that a lot of the disparity, whether it's intentional or unintentional, is a consequence of public policy decisions, then you have an obligation to do something about it. And what I said to someone is, if you thought that this was going to organically solve itself, it would have happened a long time ago. So we know that if you want to be intentional about closing gaps and about addressing disparity and about really bringing positive impact and positive change to communities of color and people of color, you have to actually build that. You have to bake it into all of your systems. It can't be an overlay. It can't be an afterthought. You've got to bake it in there. And I will tell you, I've been met, myself and some of my colleagues have been met with a wide variety of reactions when we talk about racial equity, everything from why do we even need that, to you're calling us racist. That was, a very interesting response for multiple people when you talk about systemic, institutionalized, structural racism, because on the public policy side, we're not talking about the individual. We're talking about systems. We're talking about public policy. We're talking about ordinances and land use laws and all these different things and how they impact people's lives. And it impacts the lived experience. It's not about you, Jane Doe. I'm not calling you a racist, but that was the reaction. You're calling me a racist. I'm like, no one called you racist. That's not what this is about. So that's been interesting. There also have been some people who are proponents saying, oh, you know what, this is great. We need to lean into it. And so I think part of it is the time that we are in. And I know you and I have talked about this a little bit. I do think because of social media, because of the call, the demand across the country and across the planet actually for social justice and racial equity and addressing systemic racist laws and racist policies, that there's this newfound energy around this type of work. And I will say, when I came here just over a year ago, the reactions I got a year ago versus now that we actually got the funding, there's an equity office, they're standing up the work. I never would have thought that would have happened in a year based on my, what I heard and saw when I came to Santa Rosa. And I do think part of it is the disparity playing out around COVID-19, when the numbers in Sonoma County were 74% of the positive cases were Latinx, then you're seeing disparity play out in real time. When you see the murder of George Floyd and you see the protests, then people who maybe might not have been at the front of the line say, oh yeah, we gotta, find the money to support it. They feel pressure to do so. And so it's been an interesting process. I will say there are some progressive people in Sonoma County, but overall, they are not as progressive as they claim to be or as they think they are. There's a lot of conservative people, and I think a lot of it has to do with the history. It is, if you think back, it is a agrarian-based, economy. It's tourism. It's wine growers, grape growers and wineries and ranchers. And not that those people can't be progressive, but there's a lot of old money. And a lot of those people usually, at least in Sonoma County, they tend to be a little bit more on the conservative side.
Right. Interesting. We have an election coming up, and a lot of people there's a lot of different emotions about it. Kamala Harris has a lot of folks excited. She is an African-American vice presidential candidate. Folks seem to be mobilized at this moment around voting. Ollie, I'm curious, from your study of African-American history, how do you see this election? How do you see this election? And one of the things I've reflected on, I read the news, I see what's going on in Kenosha, I see what's happening in Portland, I see what's happening in different areas. And, there's just a lot of fear from, I said, all sides, all people. People are scared. They're scared of COVID. They're scared of what might be brought into their communities. They're scared of, people who look different making decisions for them. They're scared. What does Black Lives Matter mean? Like, what is this movement? How can I support it? Is it even for me? I feel like there's a lot of fear at this time. And just curious from your standpoint, how is fear really part of this election, and how is it different from other monumental times in history when tides really need to change?
Marcus, I would say that a lot of the fear we have is based on ignorance and fear mongering. We don't know our true history in this country. And so Black people have been demonized. And so even though we're one of the most oppressed groups in the history of the country, we've been made to be one of the most feared groups. And so it's a very scary time. Current occupant of the White House is one of the worst ever. Obviously not the worst, but he's bad. It's bad. I agree with Sheba that we need new laws and policies to make things better. But to get to the fundamental change, to the deeper change, I think we need to mess with some institutions and structures. I think the country was created in a white supremacist, racist, sexist, kind of plutocratic way. And that was embedded in the institutions and structures of the political system, the economic system, and they are still with us. And so if you think about it, you mentioned the election. Do you know, Marcus, that we, the American people, do not vote for president? When I say that to my students, they get mad at me. What are you talking about? We're a democracy. We don't vote for president We don't vote directly for president like most other democratic countries do. We vote for electors to the electoral college, who we usually don't even know who they are. And they don't legally have to vote the way the majority of their state votes. This is ridiculous and outrageous. It's anti-democratic, but it's been presented as if the United States is the most democratic country in the history of the world. Mm-hmm. This is what I think many people feel, but a lot of scholars feel that way too. And so I feel miseducation has been a major, major problem as to the history and institutional structure of the country. And so we're in bad shape. I mentioned to you that I lived in Oakland for 3 years. I was so proud to be able to vote for Ron Dellums. He was my representative. I'm in a similar situation now where I vote for Rashida Tlaib, one of the members of the squad. So she's progressive, she wants change. But the institutional structure makes it difficult for folks who want progressive change. So that's why I say, I think we need an inside strategy and an outside strategy to educate, to win hearts and minds, organize and mobilize folks to keep on putting pressure on the powers that be at the local, state, and national level to see the wisdom of making some serious changes.
Great, thank you. So I would have folks write in your questions for this panel, and Katie, who's behind the scene, go ahead and send them over to me. Okay, got a couple here already. You know, one thing before I get into this, I have a couple minutes. You can make this a little bit brief, but what's interesting is I'm looking at all of you and you're all different shades of brown. Beautiful shades of brown, I have to say. And just curious a little bit from, you know, Claire, Ollie, Sheba, just curious a little bit about your experience in the skin you are in. And this is something that we normally talk within the Black family, but you know, Claire, from back growing up, would you say that your experience has been any different from a light-skinned person or medium-skinned person in your community growing up?
I don't think so. I come from a very dark family, and we're getting blanked out. A baby was born in our family this morning, and she doesn't look anything like my color. So, but as a child, San Mateo didn't have that large a community of people of color. White people didn't mess with us because we were known to knock people on their butts. My father called himself the official Negro, the official nigger of San Mateo. When he was running the San Mateo dump, which was an absolutely wonderful job, some guy called him a nigger. He busted him in his eye and was fined a lot of money. So my dad would say, he'd put his hands in back of himself and he'd say, I'm the official nigger of San Mateo because I paid $500 for the privilege. They're just, San Mateo's Black community was a very small community, and we fought. One of my brothers got a bad discharge from the United States Army because a sergeant called him a nigger. He hit that man and he got the dishonorable discharge. Not a dishonorable, but a bad conduct discharge, which wrecked his life. So I think our standing up for ourselves was good in one way because we had our bluff in, but on another way, it cost my dad $500 back in 1942, which was, you know, that kind of money was not had. And my brother lost his career because of it. So wow. Colorism, it existed, but we fought about it, including me.
Yeah, and just quick, thank you. And Ollie, some may look at you and some might say that's a black man. Some might say when you're walking around Portugal and Brazil, who knows what they might think you are. But just curious about your experience as being someone who might not typically look like your average black person from someone else's eyes.
Well, thanks for the question. I want to use one of Claire's words in response to you because I feel like you are questioning my blackness, but we can talk about that later.
Cool. And
I was born and raised in Atlantic City, New Jersey, Stanley Homes Village, low income public housing, the projects, 99, 100% black and poor. And so my family on both sides is black from Virginia and Georgia. Oh. So even though we had the complete color line in our family, I just thought that every black family had that complete color line, from so white that you could pass to so dark that you think you're from West Africa. So that was my just norm growing up. But upon reflection, I have realized that even though we were all poor, working class, I got comments like, oh, you got that good hair, or you're so handsome. And so I got those regularly, I think more than my relatives and friends. So unfortunately, I think colorism still exists in the Black community. But I think for me growing up, it was the white-black boundary and conflict was more prominent and more impactful. Internationally, obviously, it varies a lot. And so when I went to Brazil for the first time, saying I was president of my Black Student Union and I was this activist, people were looking at me like, what are you talking about, man? You're Black? And so obviously that hit me like you hit me. And so I'm like, of course I'm Black. But, you know, it depends on the political, social, cultural context that you grow up in. And obviously identity is a flexible thing. And so it varies widely, but I always say there's similarities, there are important similarities and differences between the United States and Latin America. And as I've already said, one of those similarities is that the folks who tend to be at the bottom of the economic ladder tend to be darker. It's not a coincidence. But a lot of Black activists in Latin America say that they have it worse in part because they've had to fight this ideology that says race doesn't matter, that color doesn't matter, that everybody gets along, that poverty is a thing, class is the main variable, but race, color, not so much. But I think it is very important and still very, unfortunately, influential in the life chances of Black folks in Brazil and Latin America.
See, that frustrating question that I asked got us a great answer, so thank you. And Sheba, I'll have you get on my case later. So we have one question from the audience. Sheba, is there any general advice for the young people who are fighting for a better tomorrow?
So for me, it's about understanding that it's not going to come easy and it's not going to come instantly. I know myself, I'll be the first to admit sometimes there's something about instant gratification, right? Something about that win, you get the win and you feel so empowered. But when I truly believe, and I think about this a lot because I have two children, two beautiful Black children, much darker than me. And I think about the future for them, and I get really exhausted and tired, but I have to constantly remind myself that it is me doing the work that I need to do now, knowing that maybe I will see the benefit of that right now, or maybe my children, God willing, will see the benefit of that work. And so for me, I think that's the hardest part, is understanding and staying in it for the long haul, because it is absolutely exhausting. And this country, in my opinion, intentionally, systematically tries to beat the will out of Black people. I mean, that's just my perspective. Just if there's any joy, if there's hope, they're like, oh, I'm gonna stomp that out. And so I think it is exhausting. And so for me, that's the thing to hang on to, is keep fighting for it, and know that it will not come easy. But this is what I always think to myself: the reason why they make it so hard is because they understand. The people in power understand how much potential power and authority Black people have in this country, or else they wouldn't fight so hard to keep us from excelling, or to keep us from achieving, or to keep us oppressed. And so I think that speaks volumes. They wouldn't put so much energy behind it.
Right. Awesome. You hear that, young people? Claire, how are protesters supposed to remain at home? You mentioned that you want to keep people should just be staying at home. If our voices cannot be heard in the streets, if we are incarcerated at the rates that we are, with the majority of felonies removing us from the voting process, how can our voices be heard?
I don't know the answer to that right now, but as long as the president of this country is sending out goon squads, brown shirts, jackbooted thugs to kill people while they are legally protesting, Black lives matter to me. I want them to stay alive and fight the good fight in another way. I'm not the brain to tell you what should happen right now, but I cannot stand to see another young Black man wantonly destroyed because some jerk who decides he wants to be a policeman decides that he's going to kill my son, my brother, my father. I can't stand it. I cannot stand it. It's breaking me to the core. Vote, go and vote. But the protests are getting us killed. The thing that they did this is Sunday in Kenosha, sending out and young, I love my white brothers for getting out there and marching, but I don't want anybody killed. But I am biased. I especially don't want young Black men killed. And I don't want them murdered. I don't want them shot in the back. I don't want someone's knee on their neck. That sadist that killed Mr. Floyd, he was a sadist. He needs to be caged. To even have a trial for him is breaking my heart. I don't know what to do. I really don't know what to do. We need to be able to protest, and I'm loving every white person who's out there on the line. They don't know how to do it correctly. They should listen to Al Sharpton. There's a way to protest, but in a way, there's no way to protest. When you send goons out to kill people, and that's what the president asked for the other night, he whipped up some of that stuff for those people to go out there. So I don't know what the answer is to take care of ourselves right now, but I don't want to see another Black person killed. I swear to Jesus in heaven, I don't want to see it.
Thank you, and thank you for the great questions. Ollie, do you believe that in the future, well, you are an eternal optimist, so I'll let you answer it again. But do you believe that in the future that America will really, truly be able to move beyond its racism? Maybe not today or tomorrow, but in some tangible future.
Yes, I think it's going to take major changes, but I believe in the idea of the beloved community in which we treat each other with love and respect, dignity. Obviously, we're not there now, but I think we have to speak truth to power. And so that's why I always bring up the evil triplets that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King mentioned: militarism, racism, and capitalism. They have been oppressing us and the world for a long time. So at some level, we have to deal with them and recognize that there are better ways to organize ourselves and kind of create a better structure and systems. But I think we can get there. And so that's why I draw hope from the taking down of the Confederate monuments, because you know who has to go also. I know it's difficult to talk about. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison. We can't have monuments to slave owners, to white supremacists, to rapists, to killers. And those are fighting words for a lot of people, for a lot of Americans. But I believe in truth. Let's look at the historical record. Is that who we want to put on a pedestal? And regarding, we got to find a way to organize, mobilize, protest. And the two names I think of are Robert Williams and Huey P. Newton. Black people have a right to defend themselves. Black people have a right to defend themselves. Armed self-defense is human rights. You should not let someone kill you. That's why I respect Antifa and the other groups that are willing to fight physically, violently with the vigilantes, with the Nazis, with the white supremacists. I believe in peaceful protests, but turning the other cheek is not the only form of protest. And so I think Robert Williams, NACP, North Carolina, Huey P. Newton, Black Panther Party, those are equally legitimate perspectives to our struggle for freedom and liberation. And so, again, I think if we had a better educational system, we would recognize the full range of possibility. And that's why I don't like it when the media only point to Martin Luther King and John Lewis as the only way to struggle and protest. They knew the way, saw the way, and walked the way, and they were great, but they weren't our only great leaders. And so I think we can find a way. It's not going to be easy, but that's why the struggle continues.
Right. It seems like a lot of folks are looking for the, what can I do? Just hit the button and move on. And I know for the listeners, this is exhausting work. I mean, my mom woke up this morning and talked to me and she said, you know what? A lot of this has been happening, like you guys have said, from the day she was born. And it can be really, really tiresome and really sad. I mean, really, really sad. These stories are so super sad. So in our kind of last minutes, you've given us a lot to think about, and maybe kind of just, we can go around and just share your kind of last thoughts on what can people do. And some people feel like they're working to understand themselves better and not be racist. We had a panel called What Can White People Do? There's been some great book clubs that people are part of to really look at themselves. There has been a panel on how to raise an anti-racist child, really to be thinking about this context and how to educate their youth in this context. And we've also talked about structural change and getting on city councils and pushing from policy. So maybe if you can leave the audience with kind of your thoughts on what folks can be doing in this moment to support real change. Sheba?
So I think it's a lot of different things. I think it is, signing petitions. It could be joining a march. It could be giving a donation to an organization that is doing anti-racist work, a trusted organization. It could be being an ally to someone who's already doing that work. I mean, I think one of the things that I'm struck with, and I've struggled with this a little bit and had this conversation with one of my bosses recently, is that the onus should not always be on the oppressed and on the victim to try to come up with a solution to the problem, especially a problem that they did not create and a problem that they aren't the ones that continue to perpetuate. And so for me, I think a lot of it is really being an ally. And I had someone that I work with say being an accomplice in the work. So, just beyond, standing in agreement with, but actually digging in and seeing what they could do. And also, I think a lot of it isn't even big scale stuff. It's calling it out when you see it. We, like you said, self-examination, taking a good, hard, long look in the mirror and about your biases that you have towards other people. And if the person says the racist, sexist joke, call people out. When people, are marginalizing your colleagues, call them out on it. I think that we have all seen it and heard it and experienced it over and over and over, and the time for excuses is over. And so there's tiny little bitty things that each and every one of us can do that can actually impact the world around us.
Great, thank you. Claire?
Mine is more immediate. I want people to vote. And this is what I want you to do with your ballot. Take your own ballot to the registrar's office. We must win this election. And I think we are going to win this election, but don't depend on the post office, because the person in the White House and the idiot he put in charge of the Postal Service are wrecking it. Take your own ballot to the registrar's office. Don't drop it off here. Don't drop it off there. You take it. And if you have friends who can't get theirs there, take it for them. In San Mateo County, the registrar's office is on Tower Road. Get your ballot to the registrar's office. Fill it out, get it there. If you don't know somebody to take it for you, you know that I've been your mayor, you know where I live, bring it to my house and I'll get it there for you. We've got to take care of this election.
Great, thank you so much. We do. And Ollie, besides inspiring all of us to go back and get our PhD so we can really dig in and think big, what would you say in closing that people can do in this movement right now?
Well, I think it's important for folks to find their passion, find out what they love doing, what they want to do to make the world a better place, and then go about it, get to it, make it happen. And I think we can make contributions on many different levels and doing many different things. And so I think of people like Angela Davis, who inspired me with the idea of being a scholar activist. I think of my brother Akinyele Umoja, who wrote a book about the civil rights struggle in Mississippi called We Will Shoot Back. And so that gives you a sense of how they saw the civil rights. And so everybody's got a contribution to make. And it's just finding what's going to keep you motivated. And let me just shout out my wife, Lori Robinson, her organization, Vida Afro-Latina. She's found her passion supporting Black women in the struggle against sexual violence in the United States and in Latin America. And so we all have work to do, and we got a lot of work to do.
Right.
Thanks for bringing us together, Marcus.
Yes. Yes.
I just want to say thank you guys so much. What a great conversation. And you really blessed Sonoma County with some great things to think about. And I want to say thank you to all the viewers who are paying attention and interested and getting inspiration from this panel on the continuous work that needs to be done, but just to highlight the great work that you guys are doing. So thank you again so much. I wanted to let you guys all know that we're not doing next Monday because it's a holiday. So enjoy yourselves, take a break. You got to take a break sometimes. But the Tuesday after, which is actually September 8th, we're going to be exploring with a group of local Latinas, talking about overcoming stereotypes here in Sonoma County. So we're excited for that. We're just so thankful for this forum. Thank you for the CAP staff, board, executive leadership, and all those viewing. We are so excited to continue this conversation. Thank you so much, and see you next time.